Hi Guy, welcome to episode 10 of the AMIGArama podcast. I'm your host Lorfarius, and today we are going to be looking at the game Flight of the Amazon Queen. But before we do, let's just jump into a little bit of news. Now, usually I've got several items, but I've just found one which pretty much takes the biscuits for news reading now. It's basically a compilation disc, and it's just presently for the CD32 as a Christmas special. But they have announced on the Facebook page for it that there is going to be a load of A1200 HDF or hard drive installation files. I'm not sure what they're called, but it's days away. So by the time you hear this, probably out there. So anyway, follow the link in the show notes and download a copy and see what you think. But included on it is Alar City by Pixel Glass, which is a demo of a new top-down shooter they're developing, which is full of AGA art. So that's going to be interesting straight away. Something called Box Trilogy, which is all 3 entries in a platforming shooting saga. By the way, there's piles and piles of games and things on this, so I'm not going to read out everything. I'd be here for about an hour. Next up is Bridge Strike Winter Demo, which is a River Raid clone. Something called Climby Skies, which is a gorgeous and smooth climbing platformer. Ego Wings Alpha, a promising upcoming vertical shooters. There's a fair bit of shooters on this disc. It must be one of the quickest things to make on the Amiga. I'm not trying to poop on anybody's work there. I'm sure they've all worked incredibly hard. Next up is Else We Get Mad, which is the full version of the recently released beat 'em up. I had no idea that even exists. I'm actually going to go and get a copy after this episode. That sounds pretty good. Gianna Sisters Special Edition. I think that's a recreated version with updated Amiga graphics. That does actually sound pretty good. Then Highway Sprint Alpha, which is called a Crash 'em Up, which includes 4-player support via the parallel port adapter, keyboard, or even shared CD32 pads. I bet that plays a bit odd, doesn't it? Shared pad. Anyway. Killer Bees, a new port of the quirky Philips G7000 games. I've never even heard of the G7000. That must be a pretty old retro system. Lumberjack Xmas. This is a team up by Kolb and R3D. Special Christmas edition of a charming party game. Again, no idea. Mirror, which is a neat little puzzle platformer. I might have mentioned that in a recent episode in the news. Yeah, basically 2 robots side to side, and you have to get them through the exit. That's quite a good game. Oh, yeah, I did actually. Sorry, I have mentioned this before. Anyway, it's on there. It'll save you a bit of messing around with a single install. Next up is Plumpy AGA Fixed Edition, which is licenceware platformer with a few level tweaks to allow the entire game to be completed. So the original must have been a bit buggered. Raid Over Moscow. This is a prototype of the C64 Classic featuring art from Adrian Cummings. So that must be fairly new. Tanks Fury, 1 to 4 players, tanks shoot 'em up. Terror Hawks, which is another G7000 port, and it says this one's a full-on shooter. Last Star Fighter has been fully converted for the Amiga. I'm not even sure what. That must be a shooter, it's got to be. And then a very interesting one, Time Gal, which is a full-length port of the funny and sexy Laserdisc Classic. That's already got my interest. I do actually wonder what that's been like. Yeah, so I'll go and download that. It does sound pretty interesting. That's another AROC-related game. But you can also get it from some of the games from pixelglass.org. That'll give you a few ideas of some of them that have been made. But anyway, well worth downloading and looking up. It's time to move on to this week's game, and this week we've gone with Flight of the Amazon Queen. Now, you might be thinking, oh, well, why has he gone with another graphic adventure so soon after the Secret of Monkey Island, which was, I believe, episode 4? But usually when I come to pick a game, I'll look at several things on the internet. You know, I've got lots of lists of best of games and worst games, and I'm always trying to look at stuff. And at the same time, I've got a little mini list of games I've always sort of been interested in, but never really approached. And then this just sort of came into my vision somehow, because I never played it back in the day, and it's one of those titles I bought years ago. I think it was on PC or Steam or something like that. I got it from somewhere, I can't remember where. It's been sat on a shelf and I've never played it. And it's really, really strange, because things like Broken Sword I've been completely through, and games from other studios and stuff, I've always gone back to graphic adventures, but I just never did with this one, and I can never understand why. And I sort of, you know, I was looking for an Amiga game, and I was doing the usual. I had a few game names written down, and I just fired this one up. And then I just started playing it, and then 20, 30, 60 minutes had gone, and that was it, you know, I was lost to it, I was stuck playing, so I thought, I've got to cover this one, it's going to be a great game. It was developed by Interactive Binary Illusions. What a weird name. But published by Renegade. Those are also the guys who brought out Sensi, Chaos Engine, etc. stuff like that. So they were quite a prolific publisher. Weirdly, I don't know why, they never really stood out in my mind. When I think of that company, for some reason, I always think of Virgin. Maybe there was some label mix-up or something. I'm not sure. That might just be me. I'm very odd. It released in 1995 on 11 discs. Oof, that's quite a weighty collection, especially for a graphic adventure. And this does sort of suffer from it a bit, because there's lots and lots of disc swapping. I mean, in modern times, it's not so bad, because we've all got like WHD load or some sort of emulator to run it from. But, you know, just to try this out on my Amiga, it happened quite often. It wasn't too bad. It literally wasn't. You're going from one screen to the other and then swapping discs. But you'd probably get about 10 or 15 minutes play for quite a few scenes, and you're having a swap. So, yeah, a bit of an odd one. The graphics were done by a chap called, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, I know, Steve Stamatidis. And also the graphical look was later redone. I mean, the thing is, the Amiga version came first, but it was later redone for the PC, where they added a richer colour palette. And at the same time, the game was coded by a chap called John Passfield, I believe, who also wrote the script, and then was later ported by Tony Ball, who did it onto the PC. Now, the story behind this is, I mean, the original game was developed in something called AMOS, which is like a special Amiga. I think AMOS stands for Amiga Operating System Language. I don't actually know, so please do not quote me on that. But that seems to be like one of the big pushes behind Amiga games for the time, with the odd dabble of deluxe paint thrown in there for the graphics and stuff, which seems to be, as I'm going along and I'm exploring this library in interviews and reviews, I'm hearing more and more of these different languages and things, and I'm sort of getting an idea now compared to how it was when I first started doing this, and I'm probably not much further along, am I? I mean, the game itself comes with, it's a standard graphic adventure, so you've got all the options at the bottom. This one's got a verb bar, but rather than words, you've got icons for, open, close, move, give, talk, get, look, and use. The sort of like the horizontal icons as well. It's stripped very strangely on the bar. My God, what is going on? That's a proper tongue twister. You've got nice colourful icons beside that on the inventory, which is always a plus with these sort of games. The earlier ones always had like text down the side, which you scroll through, which is very boring. So thankfully this does away with that. The story behind the game, you're basically playing a chap called, and this is a bit of a groan, he's called Joking. It's set in the 1940s, mid to late. I think it's set after the war. It's never actually confirmed. And basically, Joe is the pilot of something called the Amazon Queen, and you get commissioned to take a Hollywood actress called Faye Russell over to an Amazonian movie set. But on the way over there, the plane gets struck by lightning and you end up crashing, and the adventure sort of goes off from there. But it's quite well put out, because you don't just start off straight from that. There is a preamble to the game before the main title comes up, where you've got to get Faye back from someone else, another pilot who is sort of your rival, and there's an ongoing rivalry between the two as the game goes on, as well as a few twists and turns along the way. It's sort of an interesting story. It's very like Serial, that sort of that era of jokey, but with a bit of drama thrown in. It's quite an entertaining story, so I did quite enjoy it. Now, one of the funny things about this is one of the chaps, John Passfield, behind it. I was reading an interview with him, and he had a very entertaining story about this game, because when it came out, I don't think it was an immediate hit, but over time it just kept selling and selling and selling. And he's even said himself that they were still getting royalties off the back of this game and the PC version right up until 1999. So effectively 4 or 5 years worth, which just was not the norm for a game back then. And it's also very odd because it also asks a question later of why was there never a sequel. But anyway, one of the things they did do is when they were looking for publishers, eventually they went with Renegade, but they went to EA and they went to a vice president. And I'll just read out what I've got here. The chap himself said, "One day they informed us that their US boss, a senior vice president of Electronic Arts, would be visiting and that we should come down and show him our game. We had playable builds for both Amazon Queen and Halloween Harry, our platform game that will be published by Apogee. So we set up an Amiga and PC in the EA offices ready to show the exec. We were proud of the progress we had made and excited to show him each game. We were even hoping that we would leave with a publishing contract. The VP burst into the room and I offered to shake his hand as I'm introducing myself. 'Don't bother telling me your names as I won't remember them,' he snorted. He walked over to Halloween Harry that was running on a PC. 'This is the wrong game for the PC. Arcade games don't sell,' he informed me. Then he moved to the Amiga where Amazon Queen was running. 'And this is on the wrong platform. This should be on a PC.' Then he began a tirade about how terrible each of our games were, how an adventure game from anybody but Lucasfilm would have to be 100 times better than theirs to even stand a chance of success. He spent over 10 minutes being the most arrogant and rude person he could. Then he left." End quote. I mean, what an awesome, what the hell? And then they basically said, they were just sat there in shock, and the other EA staff apologized, and then they just left, and then luckily went to other publishers. But later on, when you first start the game, there's a bit where you meet this bellboy, and he's got a belly hanging out over his belt with a top open, and he basically works for Uncle EA apparently, and it's the same guy, it's the same name and everything, it's the same VP. So they added that extra bit in to take the mickey out of him. But if that had been it, we wouldn't have seen this game, which would have been a shame for all. Now, graphically, the game is very similar in look to Monkey Island 2, especially around the inventory bar and the icons and the way it looks and the actual world itself, especially there's certain parts where you're wandering around the jungle and you just think, God, it does look like parts of Monkey Island. It's just, it's a very strange mix, and this is sort of a spoiler, I suppose, but there are a lot of dinosaurs in the game, and you do get to see some big ones and some small ones. You've got to remember though, this is the mid-90s where Jurassic Park and Dinosaur Fever was at the top of everyone's thought, so it's quite understandable it will bleed into this game, but at the same time it has that very Lost Valley of the Dinosaur style board game feel to it. You are in a valley and it's all encompassed and you are exploring. And though there's not an active volcano like there is in that board game, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go look it up. You'll understand. But it's got this very this 1940s style and feel to it, and it just matches the era perfectly well. Now, it has a very strong sense of humour, because one of the great things about games like this is, one of the things they have to have is a strong script. And one of the things this one does nail quite well is a sense of humour. A couple of things in it. There's one part where you come across this gorilla, and he's just stood there and he's blocking the scene, and you're in the middle of a Amazon jungle, it's a gorilla, they just don't belong there, and no matter what you do, you just can't get it out of the way, and you can't carry on. You think, bloody hell, you think it's a proper hard puzzle. But if you talk to them eventually, you get, I'm spoiling this, aren't I? I'm sorry, guys. It ruins the joke a bit. But then you basically tell him that, gorillas are from South Africa and that he shouldn't be here. And then he has like this sort of I don't know, this psychological argument with himself, and then just disappears in a puff of smoke. And and it seems so odd, and you just don't expect, and I ruined it for you. But he does come back later, and he does give it as good as he gets. But there is a lot of jokes and stuff like that. I mean, there's one bit that always sticks out in my mind is you come to this part where you need to solve a puzzle, and it involves getting a sloth from one part of the screen to another, and once you've got it to move, it starts crawling along this rope, and it starts crawling and crawling, and it's like turtle sort of speed. There's nothing to it, it's absolutely going like inch by inch by inch, and it seems like it's got about 10 miles to go, and it cuts away, and it shows the playing mechanic like just stood there like wondering where Joe is and what he's up to, thinking he must be up to all these exciting things, and it cuts back a couple of hours later, and he's just sat there on the ground still waiting for this sloth. And it's just a little timing joke there which just works incredibly well. Add to this, I mean, you've got very good animation, things are very well drawn, there's no cut frames or anything, and the cutscenes are all well designed. It's a very believable world. Adding to that, you've got what I think came from Monkey Island 1, where you've got the up close, big headed looks, and they're all very well drawn. All the guys look realistic. Again, it's that Monkey Island 1 sort of look with the Monkey Island 2 graphics. It's fantastically done. Add to this, you've got the movie-like cut scenes, and it's like something out of the 1930s and 40s. And there's even one part where you're going through the adventure, and you pick up a comic book and you can actually read it. And this is what I thought was the first game to have a readable comic book in, because you actually see, you're not flicking through the pages. Except this one's a bit different, because you actually see the text popping above the heads, and it goes through it section panel by panel at a time. It's a very clever way of it flicking through to tell you the story, so it's sort of active at the same time. You only need to read it once, but it does give you a hint to a puzzle within the game. It's quite clever. But it does remind me of Max Payne 1. I mean, I always thought that was the first comic book style game where you were seeing that sort of palette, but this was way, way, way before that sort of thing. As well as this, you've also, the jungle itself is absolutely huge. It's very expansive, and there's one part where you basically walk up the top of, it's like a little rock or a pinnacle in the middle of nowhere, and you look out over the map and you can select places to wander off. And it's so well laid out. It is like a proper island, and you click on parts, you go to different sections. And of course, it's typical graphic adventure, and you've got puzzles and stuff in there, but you have to walk from section to section. It does give you that sense that you are involved in this huge world, and there's a lot more to it, that it's not just like you're on screen A, you're on screen B, you're on screen C. You actually feel like you're moving from location to location. Again, for a game which is sort of about exploring an island, exploring a jungle, it works very, very well. I think I've read about 85, 90 items in total to find spread throughout the world, because you do find a lot of things and pick up and use them together. This did surprise me actually. It's very non-linear. You can pretty much tackle a lot of the puzzles at different times and do things out of order. And then it's quite well written in that sense. So you can't break the game by solving one puzzle first before another later on. And because they're all sort of like little islands themselves in a way, not graphically within the game, but just in the way they are within the world, that it all links back together. It's very clever how it's done. And you never notice like the things drawing that all together during the game. It all feels quite natural, and it's quite good to puzzle your way through. Now, I'm probably sounding a bit overexcited about this, because I did have quite a bloody good time with it, to be honest. I did really enjoy it, but of course it does have its problems and its issues, and one of the biggest and probably one of the biggest nooses around its neck is the verb bar. I mean, the thing is, with this type of game, they can often ruin the game or make it difficult to get through. Luckily, it's not to that level, but it just doesn't work as well as it should. Now, keep in mind, this came out around about 95. So this is quite late in the graphic adventure lifespan. I mean, they only had about a year or two left before the genre died off, and other games had done it much better. I mean, one in particular, especially from around about this time, things like Full Throttle was showing that games should be moving towards like more icon-based or and simplifying things more and more to explore with. And a few of the choices are very odd at the bottom of this. I mean, if you go anywhere on the screen and right click, you just look at it automatically. But of course, they've then had to add a look button to the bottom bar, and it just seems a bit pointless. And at the same time, you know, because you're not using words, you're using icons. And I'll say myself, they're very, very odd. Like, there's one for open and close, which looks like something opening and something closing. But you just think, at the same time, you've got move, which is usually like push and pull, so that's the two combined into one, which sort of works. But a lot of these commands you just look at and you just think, well, couldn't they even use a word or simplified it even more? I mean, there's no point in the game where you need to specifically close something and leave it, or open something and leave it. You could just have an open close icon, and that, you know, or a use icon, something like that, which you do, and they could have dropped part of it off just to reduce the bar and maybe spread the inventory part. It just very, very, it's not frustrating, I'd say. That might be too strong a word, but it's just annoying whilst you're trying to play the game. It doesn't give you the benefit of what it needs to be to get you through sections of it, which is, again, it can be annoying. I don't know if this is sort of a bad thing, but the puzzles are, I mean, bear in mind, this isn't a LucasArts game, and I can sort of, in one degree, you can sort of understand the EA guy grumbling about it, you know, because it's not like a Lucasfilm type game. But the puzzles are extremely straightforward. I mean, I completed this. That's the thing. Once I started playing, which is a good point for it, I couldn't stop. But I did not get stuck, and I'm not like I'm a veteran in the sense that I play lots of graphic adventure games, but, you know, I'm dumb as anything, me, and I'll sit there and I'll puzzle over stuff and I'll take my time, and if I get too stuck eventually, I'll just give up and go on the internet, but I always try and work my way through. And in lots of these games, I get absolutely stumped and stuck, and it's ages before I'll go and get a solution. But with this, I can remember very, very few points where I was like absolutely scratching my head, and there's a lot of occasions where I was seeing items dotted around. There's a lot of stuff, you know, that you see, but you just think, oh, well, that's obviously going to be used as a rope, or it's going to be for such and such. And you see some monkeys and you think, oh, I'm going to need to have a banana. When you see you just logically jump to the solutions to puzzles, and sometimes you haven't even seen the solution to it, and you already know the answer. And then when you walk into a scene and you see something off in the background, you instantly, oh yeah, I just need to use that there. And they just needed, I think, it to be a bit more difficult, or a bit more obtuse, you know, just to hide that solution to it, so it's not straightforward, because it would have made it a bit more difficult. Now, I did say before about the actual, it does make you walk around everywhere. There's no sort of like fast travel in, like, say, the Simon the Sorcerer games, where you can double click, I think, to make him either walk faster or he'll just appear on the next. There's nothing like that, and you have to walk from screen to screen. And Joe is not the fastest. He doesn't move at a fair bit of speed, which can sort of be annoying, especially if you're in one part of the island and you've solved the puzzle and you suddenly realize, like, oh god, I'm going to need such and such, I'm going to need to go and do this. I'll have to walk over there, and it can take literally up to like 3 or 4 minutes to get to a completely different section of the island. And that does happen a fair few times because of the way the puzzles, everything's in different parts of the island, and it's great that, you know, there's not linear solutions, but a lot of the time, because things appear at different orders and ideas come to you, get stuck wandering about. And there's a few puzzles I got stuck in where I was in one part, walked back and thought, oh god, I'm going to need that over there as well. And you're sort of running about all over the place, and a lot of time you just think, if it just had a fast travel, the fact that you can go up the pinnacle and look at the map is better. At least they don't make you walk through screen after screen after screen. But it felt like it needed to be either tightened up a bit or have like a fast mode on it where you could double click to make him run. Another thing I was very, very disappointed with, and I don't know, I am only playing the Amiga version, I didn't go to the PC one, but the music is just, it's not bad, it's not good, it's very average. It does not stand out whatsoever. It just makes you sit there and you think, oh yeah, that's nice, it's passable, but there's no breakout tunes. It's not like when you saw something like, say, in the Indiana Jones type thing where you'll get a spin of the indie theme or a special theme for the action or something. It's just, it's very bland and uninspired, and it just very, very, disappointing. Now, the script for the game, this was a very odd one, because in fact, you can sort of tell, I think, that this game was made in sort of two parts, because I think there was a demo made originally for the opening section where you first meet Faye Russell. And basically, as you're going around these early sections, there's lots of jokes and humour thrown in there, but it's very, very clunky the way everyone talks, and you just think, ugh, is it going to be like this for the rest of the game? But once you get over to the jungle and it just changes. I don't know what it was. Maybe they just wrote it in two sections, or maybe the demo part was written later, but there is a definite, there is a difference there, and it does start out. But so you have to stick with it. But the thing is, because it's so enjoyable, at least you'll get past that first 15 or 20 minutes. You'll rush through it, and that's what I did. And then it just gets better and better, and the story and the humour catches up, and it gets funnier as it goes on. So stick with it, guys. I promise you, it's worth it. The story does pay off in the end. Now, sadly, and one of the strangest things playing this, this is sort of a bad point, there is no sequel. And I just don't understand why, because it sets up this whole world and the guy and his friends and his mechanic and stuff, and you get hints that they could go off and do, because it's sort of like in Indiana Jones, it's a rip take on Indiana Jones, and there was no sequel, there was no follow-up story or anything, and they could have done it so easily. I was like, there's not any major deaths in the story or anything like that, and it's quite funny and entertaining as it goes on, but it's just like a single film. You just get through, it's done, it's over, and that's it. Now, I was looking at some interviews with the chap behind it all, John Passfield, and in 2015, he did say that he was looking at making a sequel to it and returning to it, but there's been nothing. So, we're at the end of 2017 now, about to go into 2018, which is very, very sad. But he was talking about hints of saying he was looking at games for the Apple Watch and how to make a graphic adventure. I think he was playing around with the first game and seeing how it would work. So I'm not sure if that would have been such a good idea. Now, to conclude, as you can probably tell, I thought this was an amazing game. I thought I had lots and lots of fun with it, and it really pushed me on to play through the game. Once I got into it and it was all going and stuff, I really enjoyed the world. It was fun to explore, and I was very, very disappointed that there was no sequel or follow-on, and it felt like there should have been one. It does have its problems for sure, but for what you get, again, this is not like a big studio. It's not like Sierra, Lucasfilm, LucasArts, whatever, making a big game, So they were working with a much smaller team and all the rest of it. But one of the things it's littered with, just some of the stuff I noticed, it's got huge, Monkey Island influences. There's one part where you actually see the Monkey Island skull with the blue beard on, and it's only a joke reference, and you can touch it, you can't pick it up or anything, but it's just there, and it's just obvious that's where it's come from. And of course, there's the whole feel of it. It's very much like Indiana Jones. There's a lot of influence from the movies. It feels very similar to, Temple of Doom with that terrible screaming woman. I'm not a fan of that, as you can probably tell. But it all ties it together well. It makes a very believable world. There's a lot of humour thrown in there and a bit of drama as well, a bit of sex and all the rest of it thrown. Yes, there is naughty bits inside, but there's nothing too strenuous. I'm happy to say. Oh, I'm not happy to say. What am I talking about? You do get to meet a lot of Amazonian women, so make of that what you will. Now, at the time, this reviewed pretty well. I think Amiga Power gave it 84%. Amiga Format, 88%. The One, 91%. A few of there's only about 4 or 5 mags listed, but basically late 80s to early 90s. So it is a pretty good game. Again, it does have its problems. I was a bit disappointed with the verb bar, but it's one of them things you can get, you'll see past it, you can get over with it, but the experience of a whole, it's very, very enjoyable. Now, there is also a talkie version, which is available on CD. I don't think that came out on Amiga, unless it came out on the Amiga CD32, but I don't believe it did. So that's only the PC fans who get the benefit of that. But from what I've seen of it, I watched a few trailers and things. They added a few more scenes and things in here and there, and it does have some voice work. But I'll have to say I wasn't too impressed by the voices. I mean, you've got the usual way. I've seen a character and you add a voice to them in your mind because you've seen the text version first. I don't think it was that. It's just the actors and actors, they're all very flat and they sounded a bit bored, to be honest. Maybe it's just me. I didn't get on with the look and the sound of that, rather. I mean, the look was quite good, but you can pick it up now. I think the game's available for free. You can get it on Steam and stuff. I think there's even an iPad version or an iOS version, whatever you call it, available. It's well worth digging up and going through. Like I say, it's not too difficult. You won't get stuck, so you'll probably be able to complete it quite quickly. And yeah, very enjoyable game. I'm sure you guys will enjoy it too. Now, as always, guys, I think we're reaching the end of the podcast. God, I have been going on for quite a while, but again, this is such a fantastic game, and it's got such a deep history behind it and a lot of things to cover, but definitely gets the thumbs up from me. As always, thanks for listening. If you would do me a favour, and I know I always ask this, but what can I say? It's how we get out there. But if you could leave a review on iTunes, if you have any comments or recommendations, go to AMIGArama.com and stick a comment, either in the latest episode or a past one. I will answer them personally. I do always have a look. Until next time, guys.